It's delving time. We have another tasty post draft snack for you here in the dungeon, as it's time for another interview about draft strategy, or lack thereof, with the official legal advisor of the Doctors of Doom Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remain seated and try not to boo too loud for Chris the Ghost Lee. Say hello to the angry mob at your doorstep, Chris.
Good morning.
Yeah, so you may have noticed if you're a listener of the show that wasn't the nicest intro I've had. Well, I had written a really nice one, Chris, but do you want to tell them why I had to change my intro to be ghostly?
Yeah, because I ghosted you yesterday.
You did. My good buddy Chris here had me wake up early on a Saturday morning in order to record this interview, only to tell me, "Oh, my bad. I thought we were starting an hour from now." So I was like, "Okay, well that's unfortunate, but I can sleep for another half hour then we can do it." Then 5 minutes later, we'll actually have a hard out of an hour from now. So your hard out is when you schedule the interview. Cool, perfect. But it's all good. You're here now. Thank you for joining us, Chris. And yeah, let's talk about your team. We'll get into the nitty gritty of it all, but first let's take a look at the actual draft process itself. So tell me, and you made a joke about this in text, so I don't know if this is true or not. Did you have a draft strategy coming into the draft, or as you mentioned, did you not have one and just kind of played it by ear? What coming in? Did you have a plan? I guess is what I'm asking.
No, I sort of played it by ear.
Okay.
Yeah, I played it
So
by
it
ear.
wasn't that you had no plan. It was more of a you were planning on seeing how the picks fell and then going with the flow type situation.
Yeah. Like we'll get into the first round in a second. I had a
Sure.
general idea of what I wanted to do, but in terms of like actual, this is what I'm going to do and doing mock drafts and things like that, I didn't really do that this year.
Gotcha. Okay. Is it just because I know, and jokes aside about you ghosting yesterday, I know you're a very very busy person. You run your own business. You're married. You got some changes to your life upcoming. So I know you got a lot going on. Is it just you didn't have time to dive into it this year, or you just needed a break from the hustle and bustle of going all in on fantasy?
Yeah, I think is the latter. I feel like fantasy is like my escape, so why overdo it? Why put a bunch of hours into it
Sure.
when I don't have that many hours and stress out about it? I would rather just, draft, have fun, and see how the season goes.
Yeah, it's ironic. Actually, I've kind of been on that path up until this year, where I had kind of taken a step back from because I used to get super into it, and I'd taken a big step back. I didn't do a not that I mean I didn't do like break level of no research, but like I didn't do a lot of research. Kind of backed off it and chilled off it just to, like you said, it was supposed to be fun, and I got in a situation where I was in like 5 different leagues, and it's like, man, it's just so much work. Um, so I really dialed it back. But then we started the podcast, and obviously things changed because now like I do research and stuff for the podcast, which has actually made it more fun for me. So it's kind of worked out great. The podcast that I can actually be more focused and know more about what's going on while it's still being fun, as opposed to it feeling like a job. So definitely feel you on that. So let's go ahead and start about the. You mentioned your first round picks. We're going to start about that. The first round, I think, pretty cookie cutter. I think the first six picks, not necessarily in this order, but I think everyone kind of figured these were going to be the first six guys off the board. Is that what you thought going in, and you knew that you were going to have the pick of what's left after the big six, or did you think one of those guys might have fallen to you? What did you come in thinking? I know you didn't have a major plan for the draft itself, but I imagine you had at least a plan for the first round.
Yeah, I should have figured this because it's DoD. I thought CMC was possibly going to fall. I wasn't 100% sure on that. I thought it was probably a 50-50.
Right.
But I made the joke several times, I think to you and then a couple other people that I was going to be in the position of having to choose Justin Jefferson or CMC, which would have been hilarious, given the fact that I chose first the last 2 years, and I chose JJ and then CMC, and both of them went out on injury the years I chose them. So I didn't want to have to choose between those two. So I'm glad that CMC was off the table because I would have seriously considered him had he fallen. So yeah, but other than that, everything went pretty much more or less what I thought. I knew I wasn't going to go Justin Jefferson. I just think I have a bad taste in my mouth, and it's probably subjective rather than objective on that.
Uh,
But and then when I had the choice, when you're looking at picks 7 through 12, there, I guess 7 through 13. Um, I went with upside. I didn't want Jonathan Taylor. I've had him before. It wasn't that fun to own. Kyron Williams is a great pick. Also have had him in other leagues before. Um, and I just didn't think he was a very sexy pick. I talked about Justin Jefferson's, Josh Jacobs I wanted to stay away from. Just I don't know why, but I just didn't like him this year. And then Achan, definitely not. I had him last year as well. I think in this league, did not work out for me. And CeeDee Lamb, I've had him in other leagues as well, but this isn't a PPR league. So I probably would have gone CeeDee Lamb had this been a PPR league, but since it wasn't, I just went with the upside. I know it's a huge question mark, a huge risk, but I think I can, it's fair to say after the last 2 years, why go the safe route? Why not just go for a little risk and see how it turns out?
Yeah, I hear you, and yeah, I mean, I think this pick has been more controversial than I thought it would be. I thought when you took it, it made total sense. Like I think on my big board, I also had Genty right up there. I know I had him above Taylor and Williams as well. Not that I didn't like those guys, but just I I think when I gave the draft analysis of your team, I have high hopes for him because I'm a Raider fan, and I realize that skews me. So like, I didn't want to have to be in a position to draft him, not because I don't think he'll be good necessarily, but because as a Raider fan, I don't want all my eggs in one basket. If Genty sucks, that means the Raiders suck. So that means my fantasy team and the Raiders would both suck, right? Uh, so for me, I hope he does well for you, even though I wouldn't have had the gall to draft him. So it sounds like though so let's say in a world where Vinny takes Genty, because you mentioned you thought McCaffrey might fall, and I thought he might have fallen too. I mean, honestly, this is a guy who could be RB1 and he gets drafted fifth pick, which is kind of wild. But I think he might have. I thought he was going to fall at least a little more too after the Brian Robinson trade, because I know Vinny straight up told me that he was going to take CMC until the Robinson trade happened, and then was seriously reconsidering it. And he's not happy with having to take him at 5. I think he ended up the value was just too good to not take him, so he took him. But there's a world where he doesn't. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that Vinny takes Genty instead of McCaffrey, and you're left with that decision. Do you know what you would have done? Would you have taken CMC, or would you taken one of these other guys? Because it sounds like you're not super high on any of the other guys that went after this pick, other than maybe Kyron Williams.
Yeah, yeah. Other than last year, CMC has been a workhorse, right? And he's proven that he can take the workload and do well with it. And I think he qualifies for that role. So I would have been all over Christian CMC
Okay,
even after the Brian Robinson trade. I just would have backed him up.
gotcha. All right, cool. So you open up round one with what's going to be a workhorse running back. You know, whether he's going to be a top 5 back or not is yet to be seen, but he's definitely going to be a guy who gets 20 plus touches a game, and I think that's something solid to pick up in your first round pick, a guy who you know is going to touch the ball. So let's move into round two. Round two, you're kind of right in the middle of this quarterback run here, although you might have gotten one of the better ones. Considering you were the 4th person to take QB, but there's kind of what's considered to be a big 4, big 5 QB. So when you picked up Jaden here, is this something you were targeting with second round QB from the beginning, or you just saw the run happening and you wanted to get in on one of the top 4 or 5 guys?
Yeah, not at all what I expected to happen. This is where I just went with the flow. And when I saw Burrow and Allen go off, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then Lamar went off the board. And honestly, I had Jaden slotted as my number 2, just because of the rushing potential this year.
I was going to ask you about that because I think I don't know I think Jaden Daniels is higher on some people's lists than some of the other guys. I talked about it on the pod. Josh Allen, like the benefit of Josh Allen is he's going to finish in the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks. He does it every single year, but Josh Allen's never QB1. So like I don't know. I think I might have taken Daniels over Allen as an upside play potentially. Like I don't know. Maybe for the safe pick it's Allen, but I think Daniels could be the sexy pick, especially I mean he brought back all of his weapons plus added Debo Samuel, so his offense only got better.
Yeah, my only real concern with Jaden is I've seen this with Cliff in the past is if defenses figure him out or figure out Cliff, then Jaden might be less effective. I think there is something to being a rookie in the NFL these days and coming in like almost NFL ready and having a great rookie season.
And being
I
on,
saw the
yeah,
potential for regression, but at the same time, like I still had him as my number 2 potential like upside quarterback. So this was a no-brainer for me. I wasn't expecting to go quarterback this early, but it's DoD, so I was super comfortable doing it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, for anyone who somehow listened to 40 episodes so far and still doesn't know about our league, we don't have a flex spot in our league. So our league's 2 running back, 2 wide receivers is a very old league. So the value and also 6 point passing TD. So the value of quarterback is much higher here than you'd see in another league. I'd never recommend you go second round QB in most leagues, but in this one that's a solid pick. And even though you were kind of towards the end of the run, you still ended up with what is pretty unanimously considered one of the top 4. So solid pick there in round two. So let's move on to the third round. And third round looks like you go with your first wide receiver here. Brian Thomas Jr. This is an interesting pick to me personally because I know a lot of people like Brian Thomas Jr. was great last year, but a lot of people came into this year like afraid to draft him for some reason. Did you have that fear about him, where you're like, no, dude was great last year, I want it?
Uh, he's a question mark for sure.
Okay,
But
so
at
you kind of
this
had the same
point,
reservations then. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. But at this point, you see, obviously Nico Collins going ahead, Puka Nacua, and so I'm just thinking, T. Higgins, AJ Browns, or Brian Thomas Jr. Those are like my picks, right?
Right.
Um, I think I've said this during the draft. I am not high on T. Higgins. I think Austin said that he won a lot of leagues last year, and he probably did. I have owned T. Higgins probably at least 3 of the last 4 years. And his hamstring is always injured. I hear you guys talking about hamstrings. There's something always going on with him, and he's always like, you know, I I don't know if it's just like a subjective perspective of what's going on with T. Higgins from having owned him so often in the past. But I do not like dealing with him and like last minute having to find a backup wide receiver to replace him. When he plays, he's fantastic. But when he doesn't, obviously you're left in a scramble. AJ Brown obviously is a little injured right now. So at this point, I just went with the upside, what seemed like weirdly like a safe pick. Even though I'm not 100% sure on him, he was safer to me than those other two I just talked about. And, I know Trevor Lawrence, it's all dependent on Trevor Lawrence, but I think that he is good enough and athletic enough and a good enough wide receiver that I would go with him. And that's why you see I made that choice so quickly is because once the wide receivers ahead of him won, it was an easy pick for me.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned T. Higgins' injury concerns. I mean, the last 2 seasons he's missed 5 games, and like that's when you play a 14 game fantasy season, you're talking about over a third of your team's games you're missing a guy who's supposed to be wide receiver one. So definitely get that. AJ Brown, same thing. He's one of those guys that you kind of never know what he's going to do. He can have 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he can also just have 2 catches for 20 yards. So I definitely feel you on that. But yeah, Brian Thomas, he was great last year. A lot of the fantasy experts have him rated highly. CBS has him as number 4. Now we've talked about how CBS's rankings are wonky, but I'd still imagine most places have him top 5, 6 wide receiver, and you're able to get him in the third round, which is great value. So for whatever reason, fantasy drafters are afraid to draft him, but all the experts and his actual play on the field say he should be taken highly. So this could work out to be a fantastic pick where you're getting a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, even though he's like the eighth or ninth receiver taken off the board. So totally understand your logic there. Let's move on to the next round here. Okay, this is probably the most questionable pick you've made so far, I imagine. I think so far everyone you've picked is like solid, talented, and younger, I will point out. So far you have 2 second-year players and a rookie on your squad. So you're going with youth, and then all of a sudden you're going to change it up and get a veteran on the team here with Alvin Kamara. This is a guy you reference. This is not a PPR league, and this is a guy whose kind of bread and butter is receptions. I mean, not that he's not done well otherwise, but just that's kind of like his main moneymaker. What were your thoughts here? Was this just the last remaining running back you were happy with, or did you actually have high hopes for Kamara this year? What went into this pick? Because there's like still like this last tier running back kind of feels like we're on. There's still a few more before we kind of get into the throwing a dart running back situation. So why Kamara, I guess, over the guys who went after him: Swift, Pacheco, Pollard, Jones, etc.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I hated this pick when I made it, and I still hate it.
Okay.
But I was queuing up like players like running backs and wide receivers as we were going down the draft and during my downtime, and he was right at the top. And I honestly didn't really love anybody else behind him. I know obviously Pacheco went, Pollard went, Aaron Jones went. I did not have them going that early either. I thought I would have a shot at one of them coming back. So I honestly, obviously, after going running back, quarterback, wide receiver at this point, even though I didn't have a plan, I knew I wanted to have at least 2 running backs here. So I thought Kamara, just as a potential guy is a number one guy and is gonna at least see some playing time versus like the split back situation or a situation in which you're a lead back but you're not really getting that many carries. I thought Kamara here would be getting the most looks. either by receptions or by carries. Still didn't like it. I think I audibly groaned when I made this pick during the draft,
Huh.
and it still kind of makes me feel weird inside. But and honestly, I should have known this is DoD that a bunch of other running backs were going to fly off the board. And it's not like a huge amount went, but enough went that by the time it got back to me, as you can see in my next round, I started going wide receiver because there were literally no other running backs that I wanted to pick up.
Yeah, it definitely dries up quick in our league for sure. So yeah, I guess you have some reservations there, but like you said, all these other situations, it is kind of tough. I mean, Swift is technically the guy, but he's only ever been the guy for one season of his whole career. Pacheco does have competition, even though he's supposed to be the number one. Aaron Jones, they just brought in competition. Pollard is number one for the first 4 weeks, but then the competition comes back after he gets off IR. Montgomery is the number two. So I get what you're saying. I mean, Kamara is the guy that currently has no like real competition. His backup has never like challenged him since he's been there. So totally get it. So yeah, you mentioned wide receiver. So this is an interesting pick, at least from my standpoint. What's your thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr.? Because he's a guy who came into the league last year with so much hype around him, and then he just did not live up to that hype. And full disclosure, I know you're a Cardinals fan, and he's a Cardinal, so there's that play as well. But I mean, as you can see, right after him goes Terry McLaurin, who's a guy who finishes a top 5 fantasy wide receiver last year. And this is after Terry McLaurin, I think he had not yet signed his contract, or had he? I can't remember when we drafted whether or not Terry was signed. I don't remember, but yeah, what are your thoughts? Like, are you high on Harrison having a big sophomore campaign after the disappointing rookie season, or did you just have more faith in him than the guys going after him, and specifically McLaurin? Because I mean, he's right here, and how well he played last year. So
Yeah, to be honest with you, this is more of like a homer pick. This is
sure,
me wanting to enjoy watching my fantasy team and root for Marvin Harrison Jr. to have a good year. I realize he could not have a great year, but at this point, especially wide receiver two in DoD, I mean, that is a position that I'm always swapping out during the season,
yeah,
right? So at this point, it's like, hey, why don't I pick up somebody I like? In my mind, he's not any worse or better than some of the guys coming off the board at this point. Scary Terry, love him. Won me my first pie bet, I think my first and only. But at the same time, it's just I've had him before, so and it's like he does have some additional competition right now. It would have been nice to have the stack looking back on it. I wasn't thinking as much of that. I saw Marvin Harrison Jr. there in round 5 and I got excited because I didn't really see him being drafted that late. I mean, now that I think about it, there probably is a reason that nobody else wanted him. But hey, it's like I said, it's more fun for me to have someone on my team and root for them during the season.
yeah, for sure. I mean, totally get that. But you just referenced the stack. Uh, had you realized at the time that McLaurin would have been a stack with Daniels, would you have made this pick differently? Do you think, or do you still like the decision you made?
I mean, yeah, looking at it now, it's like I don't get that many opportunities at stacks, and it would have been fun to have that stack in DoD. It's been a really long time since I've had one. So yeah, probably could have gone there, McLaurin there, and then hearing everybody talk about Harrison Jr. Thus far on the pod and stuff, he might have even fallen to me in round 6, maybe. I don't know that for sure, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, look, his dad's one of the greatest of all time. He came in with a lot of hype, and he still had 885 yards and 8 touchdowns. It's not like he was bad, right? I think a lot of the discourse, and like I have to watch myself too, is like people drafted this guy last year thinking he would be a wide receiver one, and he just wasn't. But if you get 885 yards and 8 TDs out of your wide receiver two, you're happy with that, right? Like that's not bad for a wide receiver two, and you drafted him as a wide receiver two in the 5th round. So I don't hate this pick. I think this pick is probably better than most people give it credit for. Now again, it's not who I would have taken, but I also don't think it's like I don't think it's a bad pick. I think it's more of like people just have a bad taste in their mouth last year who drafted him to be their wide receiver one and he wasn't. You're not drafting him to be your wide receiver one, so I think it's going to work out a lot better for you.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if you watch the Cardinals, Kyler has been this way his entire career. He force feeds the ball to whichever wide receiver he likes, right? And, it was Marvin Harrison's rookie year. I know he didn't have as big of a year. I mean, it's the Cardinals. Let's be realistic here, right? Like, were you gonna see a number one wide receiver come out of the Cardinals? I mean, maybe, but I think that Kyler his play improves. I think next year, this coming year, And I think that Marvin Harrison's play will improve along with experience in the NFL and having a better Kyler Murray.
Fair enough. All right, moving on. Now this pick, I love this pick, and this pick has actually gotten better since we drafted. Uh, Again, you're sticking with youth. I think I pointed out, other than Kamara, every single player on your team is a first or second year player. Harrison Jr., second year player. Tedero McMillan, first year player, rookie wide receiver. Currently the wide receiver one for the Cardinals. At the time you made this pick, there were a lot of other mouths to feed. Since you've made this pick, the Cardinals, excuse me, of the Panthers, the Panthers have traded last year's number one target in Adam Thielen. They've traded him away, and Coker, their third string wide receiver, has gone on IR. So this is a guy who already had a lot of buzz about him and now has a whole lot less competition. So personally, I love this pick. What do you think about it? Were you excited to make this one, or is this just you rolling the dice again because it's your wide receiver 3 and you're just hoping to hit upside?
I was excited about this one. I've drafted him in every league thus far. This was my third draft. It was
Oh,
the
so
last.
this is the guy you've been targeting then in a lot of your leagues, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. I think you mentioned it too, Alex, multiple times in the past. Bryce Young, his play was really, really good when he came back. I think he's finally starting to, the game is slowing down for him, as they say, right?
Yeah.
And like you see a guy like Bryce Young who gets thrown into the fire that early. How many, quarterbacks do well in like their first season, their first two seasons, right? So I think by the time Bryce Young came back, he finally had enough of those mental reps. And then obviously they drafted Tedera McMillan for that role as the number one wide receiver. They wouldn't have drafted him for any other reason. So he's just a guy I've been targeting as a potential upside player that's been going in about round 6 or 7, right? That could potentially be in my eyes like a top 18, if not top 12.
Yeah, I mean, look at you mentioned Bryce Young. Like people always talk about like rookie QBs. Well, you have to consider the situation they're going into. The situation he went into in Carolina was bad. They had nothing, and people who don't remember, like when they drafted Bryce Young, that's when they traded away CMC. So they drafted this guy to be quarterback, and then traded away their best offensive weapon. Like, talk about having a safety blanket in Christian McCaffrey as your running back. Now it hasn't worked out with the injuries lately, but he wasn't injured as a Panther. Like they gave away a safety blanket, gave him nothing to work with. Look at guys like Sam Darnold and Geno Smith who get drafted by the Jets and play on bad teams and like, oh, these guys are bad. Well, what happens when they get out of New York? Sam Darnold, viable starter in the NFL. Geno Smith, viable starter in the NFL. So who's to say that Bryce Young can't be? And yeah, I think T Mac here is a great pick. I think it's interesting that you've been targeting. I've been targeting a lot of leagues too, but I've been trying to get him as a value pick, and I have helped my sister and my dad do drafts. I've gotten them on all their teams. I have not been able to get him on any of mine yet, and I'm very salty about it. But I have 2 more drafts coming up Monday, so hopefully I can get him on one of my teams instead of just living vicariously through my dad and sister. So
Yeah, well, if he has a rough first few games, send over that trade request, Alex. I'll consider it.
for sure, man, I'll send it over. I'm still concerned about my first pick. I know we're about talking about you, but just I'm not my second. Malik Neighbors. You had him last year. How do you feel about Malik Neighbors' pick? Because this is a guy I did not have rated as the top receiver left from the board, but I took him anyway because of the upside play. I couldn't get over the fact that he had 170 targets last year. But you had him on your team. How do you feel about him this year?
Dude, I love Neighbors.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
He's one of those few players. I had him last year in another league, or in this league, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And dude, like he just gets force fed the ball,
yeah,
and he's talented enough that he comes down with some of those, and he just puts up numbers based on sheer volume, right?
yeah.
And that's what you want in a wide receiver one. That was my when I drafted Justin Jefferson before he got injured. In my mind, it was he is going to get force fed the ball so many times, he's going to be just as good as a top running back. And then lo and behold, he gets injured. So like, but Malik Neighbors is in the same situation. Obviously, he doesn't have Kirk Cousins throwing to him, but I think that hopefully what the Giants do is have Dart starting sooner rather than later, and I think that that'll be a good combo.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's why I ended up making it against my own rankings because I was looking at the guys that I had rated above him, and I was like, honestly, I just feel like his target share is going to be so high that he doesn't have to be great. If you throw somebody the ball 15 times a game, he doesn't even have to catch half, and still, if he gets less than half and you have a 7 catch 80-yard touchdown game, like it's still a good game. So, all right,
Exactly.
let's move right along. Here's another good pick by you. So another you've gone wide receiver now, what 3 rounds in a row here. So you did mention you like to swap out that wide receiver 2 position a lot. So here's a third straight wide receiver in Jalen Waddle, and this is a guy I think I've talked about. I think it was on the pod, but this is a guy in games where Jalen Waddle and Tua Tagovailoa play in the same game. He's a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, no doubt. The problem is both of those guys are so injury prone that it's extremely rare that they play in the same game. So what were your thoughts here? Not about Waddle himself necessarily, because I mean, obviously he's a good player, but more so you've now taken 5 wide receivers and are still at only 2 running backs, I believe. So what was your decision-making process here to pick up yet another wide receiver?
Again, going with the flow of the draft.
Okay.
I literally had Jalen Warren queued up here, and honestly, that your pick of Njoku right below. Let's see, that happened like 7 picks later.
Mm-hmm.
I was praying that he was going to come back to me. In
Okay.
my mind, I didn't think tight ends were going with any nearly as much frequency, so I was hoping that he came back to me. It really was Jalen Waddle, Jalen Warren, and Njoku who were queued up for me. So honestly, looking back on this, I'm happy with the pick because I think it's a huge value pick in round 7. You are trying to catch lightning in a bottle when Tua and Jalen both play, but all signs point to they're both going to play, and I think hopefully Waddle, his last year of being sort of injured the entire time is worn off. But you know, at this point, I'm just going with what I think is the best value. Um, you guys have talked a lot about the Rashee Rice pick. That probably would have been a decent pick as well, considering the fact that I have enough wide receivers here. But I still went with Waddle because I think Rice at the time was a huge question mark.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know if I like it, but again, he's my wide receiver 4 at this point, right?
Yeah, it's also
So,
worth noting at the time that Mitch took this was before they had announced that Rice had made the deal for the early suspension.
right.
So when we did our draft, it was still going to be a situation where Rice plays 4 weeks and then has his hearing to potentially get a 6 to 8 week suspension in the middle of the season. So yeah, I think this, if someone's drafting today, they're like, wait, he's only going to miss 6 weeks. Well, that was not the situation at the time when we were drafting. So
Yeah. And this is one of those classic things, Alex, where I wish I had gone tight end here because the Waddle craft, if you reverse that and I have Njoku and then Travis Hunter, who I think is an interesting pick, or like
yeah, I think 3 tight ends went. Because Kelsey and Joku and Warren, all 3 went between your picks.
yeah. So if I had Njoku and then another one of the wide receivers that got picked after your Njoku pick, I think I would have been a little happier.
Yeah, definitely. I feel you. Yeah, I mean, look, 5 wide receivers is bold, but I mean, the way I see it, you've drafted 5 wide receivers, and I really like 4 of them. And the 5th one, it's not that I dislike; it's just that I'm less high on him than maybe some other people with Marvin Harrison. But again, I think he's very serviceable. I think there's no way you don't come out of this with 2 viable, good wide receivers. I think it's more going to be a situation of are you able to move the ones you don't want, because you don't want to just be dropping quality starting wide receivers, right? But you also can't devote half of your bench spots to wideouts necessarily. And B, are you going to guess right each week about which one to start? That's what would drive me insane. So I wish you luck in that category, because it's one of those where one of those guys is going to have a monster game each week, but figuring out which one it's going to be is going to be mind-numbingly painful for you. So I wish you luck, my friend.
Yeah,
Trying to figure out which
yeah.
one to
If
start.
anybody listening to the pod is thin on wide receivers, hit me up.
For sure. Hey, if Keenan Allen ends up, being the Keenan Allen from 2 years ago, my Ladd McConkey pick looks awful, and I'll be hitting you up for sure. I hope that's not the case, but we'll see. All right, moving right along. So yeah, this was the one pick on your team that I did not like. Not a Tucker Kraft guy. I had him last year, and he was great when he was great, but he was abysmal when he wasn't. So as we mentioned, though, a lot of the tight ends went. I guess my main question about him was why him over a guy like Ingram. I know personally I like Ingram. Now Ingram's more of a PPR player than a touchdown guy, so I get that. So is your Tucker Kraft pick more of a, you think this guy's going to be pulling in touchdowns and you're okay with the feast or famine situation at tight end, or what's the thought process there? Him over Ingram or whoever else was left at the time.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think when you don't have a top tight end in DoD, you're on the tight end carousel anyways.
Uh huh.
And so to me, this is just me picking a spot starter who is going to be feast or famine and then see how he works out. And if he doesn't work out in the first few weeks, like maybe he has one good game and two bad games, then I probably am starting to look at the waiver wire for a more consistent tight end.
Sure.
Also, I mean, tight end traditionally, you can find like a potential top 12 guy off the waivers within the first few weeks in fantasy football, right?
Someone's
Like
gonna
that's not
emerge.
out of the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, one last. I forgot to mention this on your Waddle pick. We talked about when they played together. So these are the games where he played with Tua last year. So if we go to game log, so they played together week 1. He had 5 catches for 109 yards, and they played together for 3 weeks at the end of the year, where he had 8 catches for 144, 4 for 53, and a 2 point conversion. He had 7 points here, 9 for 99, and a 2 point conversion. So as you can see, the 4 games he played with Tua, he was great. So, but unfortunately, they only played together for 4 weeks. But anyway, all right. Moving right along, then let's see. Okay, you finally decide to pick up your third string running back. So you really do need to move wide receiver for running back because your third string running back, Quinton Judkins. Now it says Cleveland, implying that he plays for the Browns, but he's not actually under contract as of today. And the season starts on Thursday. Today is Sunday, so season starts in 4 days. He's not on the team, and this is your third string running back. So I know the running back was incredibly thin at this point. There's pretty much no one left that you know is going to be good. So it's all shots in the dark here. Was this just an upside play of if he does sign and become the starter, that could be great for you, or like what was the thought process here for a Judkins over a guy who's already on the team, like Chubb, Scadaboo, Williams, who go right out shortly after?
That's exactly it. Like we're looking at, I will say, I think the tight ends coming off the board between rounds 7 and 8 picks freaked me out, and I went Tucker Craft because I just thought I had to go tight end there. Otherwise, I would have been like even in more trouble than I was at the tight end position. Seeing the running backs that went before Quinton Judkins, I wish I had gone running back. At this point, he's just a hope and pray type of situation. And yeah, running back does not look good for me at this point.
Okay, for sure, for sure. And then moving right along. Now this pick I like a lot better. Bas- Bashal Tutin, and again, I think this is kind of the same situation. It's a shot in the dark pick. There are some insiders that I have heard that think he is going to be the one that ends up winning this job in Jacksonville. Now, I don't know when that's going to be, but Etienne and Bigsby have both had opportunities to be the guy, and neither of them have shown that they can be that guy. Bigsby, since he came in the NFL, he's had a couple of good games, but more bad than good. I love him. He's an Auburn guy, but, that's just how it is. And then Travis Etienne, he had that one amazing season, and since then he has been the definition of mediocre. So there's a lot of buzz around this guy. Now he is technically third on the depth chart as it stands, but there's a lot of buzz here, and I do think that you take have both the other guys been taken? I know Etienne had gone. Had Bigsby already gone as well, or did you take him over Bigsby? Do you remember?
I took him over Bigsby, I
Okay.
think. I can't. Let me run a control line really quick because I'm following along as well.
Bigsby's in round 6.
Oh no, no, Bigsby was
No, so
already.
Bigsby was gone. Okay, so he
Oh,
was the last
yeah.
one available, but it sounds like you would have taken him over Bigsby though, based on how you just answered that question. But yeah, so yeah, what are your thoughts here on Bashal Tutin?
Yeah, so as a former Etienne and former Bigsby owner in fantasy football, I was not interested in either of those guys. I've heard similar things. He was like one of the quote unquote sleepers based on some of the sources that I follow, and they talked highly of him. So yeah, at this point with Quinshin and Tootin, I'm just kind of like shot in the dark. Hope one of these guys works out. Because at this point, it's more about upside to me
Sure.
than like someone like I don't mean to call you out, Sylvia, or anything like that, but I'm just looking at the big board like Ramondre Stevenson. Like uh, I'm not really interested in that. You know who he is. It seems like Henderson's going to have the job. You look at Scadaboo, who doesn't have the job either. Nick Chubb, no interest in that. So yeah, I just at this point I'm praying for one of these guys to work out.
Sure. All right. We'll wrap this up here. A couple more picks. Jordan Love, backup QB. That's more of a just in case, I imagine, because you're never playing matchups with Jaden Daniels, right? You're starting him every week, or do you think you'd actually play matchups?
No, no, no. This is classic, just backing your quarterback up in
Sure.
DoD.
Okay.
Number one, because it's smart, and then number two, it also takes a viable starter off the board for your opponents.
Fair.
So, and I got Tucker Kraft, so we're going for that stack.
Yeah, you did get you backdoored your way into a stack, I suppose. Niners D, not a lot to talk about there. It's a defense; those are hit or miss. Tyler Algier, same thing. I think you're just making throwing some shots here. If anything were to happen to Bijan, then Algier obviously becomes a guy who's going to get 15, 20 touches a game. So
Yeah,
like you
that's a
said,
bonus too. And I don't mean to be this type of player, but like also Bijan's in my division.
sure,
So
sure.
taking Algier to me seemed like the logical move right there in the late round.
Yeah, okay, no, that's strategic. I mean, we've talked about a few times on the pod where it's been a couple picks. Yeah, when Dad snipes Brian Robinson because Vinny just didn't take him, he took Roma Dunze for some reason, and so Vinny didn't get to handcuff CMC. So for sure, taking away someone's handcuff definitely a strat. Uh, let's see, oh, went too far, and then finally the last round kicker. I mean, did you have to go with your Asian brethren here and pick up the Young Ho Koo
I
or Young
I
Wei
I
Koo?
did. I did. He did start missing some kicks
He
as of
did.
late
He's
last
been such
year.
a steady Eddie up until last year. Like
Yeah, but my hope is that he's worked some things out in the off season, and always good to have a fellow Korean on the team.
for sure, for sure. And for the record, anyone listening, I know his name is Young Wei. It's just funny to call him the Young Ho. Deal with it.
I call him the Young Ho.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
call him the Young Ho all season.
yeah. And I mean, as you can see, your draft time, you were the third fastest drafter. So, like I said, you're a busy man. You got places to be. You don't have time to make these picks. So, 4 minutes 23 seconds, third fastest draft.
Huge, huge. Who
So
beat me out?
Austin, who was lightning in a bottle at 3 minutes 11 seconds, and then
Woo.
Luis surprisingly at 4 minutes and nine. But Luis's defense, he was at work, so he probably had to make his pick and then get back to work each time. For those of us on the Zoom call, you can see he was clearly in his work uniform, standing behind the counter. So yeah,
Austin must have had his entire rankings queued up and was just clicking draft as soon as his name came up. That's impressive.
yeah. No, Austin's draft was lightning paced. It was wild. Yeah, when you look at all his pick time, I think there's only one pick where he took any amount of time at all. All right, so that's the overall draft. So now we're gonna actually take a look at the overall team itself. So we went through the strategy, and so you kind of went with the flow there. Obviously, I think you made some high quality picks. You might have gone a little heavy wide receiver, but what you're doing, you're going for value. So you're just gonna need to find a way to get some trade bait out of it. I will show the draft recap. They give draft grades now. We've talked about CBS's CBS's ratings are wild, but based on CBS's ratings, you got a B plus, which is solid. I mean, that's on the upper half,
Huge.
right, of scores. So I mean, according to CBS, you did decent with your position, so B plus. But let's see how you feel about it, not just CBS. So let's take a look at your squad here. Now that the whole draft is said and done, how do you feel about the team overall? And is there any specific pick or picks that you wish you could take back and change?
No, I'm pretty happy with this lineup, to be honest with you. I'm obviously with Tootin and Judkins, if they don't work out relatively quickly, I'm probably going to end up dropping them for, someone on the waiver wire.
Uh,
Would like to hold on to Algier, just in case something happens to Bijan, but obviously, that's just sort of if I have the space, I'll keep him there. If not, I'll drop him. My four wide receivers I like a lot, and I'll probably keep them queued up there. And then at some point, we'll probably be rotating out Tucker Kraft for another tight end. I like this as a starting lineup. I'm pretty happy with it. There's no like glaring weaknesses. The one thing in DoD that I've started to do over the years is just try to draft starters, right?
right.
It's hard when your number two running back is also the number two running back IRL. It's sort of like a hope and a prayer sometimes. So, except for like those true running back by committee teams.
Right.
So, outside of that, I'm pretty happy that everyone on my team is like considered the QB one, wide receiver one, running back one, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Yeah, like I said, in the draft review, I kind of waffled back and forth, but it's more like I called your team potential. I think your team has the most potential, right? Because as I mentioned, this is second year player, rookie, second year player. Even on your bench, you had rookie, rookie, rookie. So like you have a lot of youth. You and I both actually have youthful teams. I think yours might be even more youthful than me. So if the youth hits, I mean your team has a ton of potential. I think, like you said, I think the The one major concern I have is you don't have a third string running back. But as long as I think it comes down to Kamara. Is honestly what it's going to come down to. Because like I think Genty's going to be a set it and forget it player. So it just comes down to, is Kamara the Kamara that he's been the last couple of years, where when he's on the field he puts up fantasy numbers? If so, then you're set. You just have to find bye week replacements weeks 8 and 11, and honestly week 8 you got half your teams on a bye anyway. So you're punting week 8 anyway. So really you got one bye week that you have to worry about as long as Kamara, keeps being Kamara. So I like the team. I do overall, but like you said, I think you're gonna have to figure out a way to flip some of these because you literally have 5 guys that most people will be happy starting at wide receiver, but you can only start 2 of them. There's no flex, so I think it's going to come down to what magic you're able to work out of that. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join me. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, that's perfect. Thanks for taking the time, Kamish. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. Also, I can count. He has 4 wide receivers, not 5. I miscounted, but still, same point. Anyway, peace out, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Labor Day weekend.
See ya.